Poor thinking buys comfort. Rich thinking builds wealth. Most people fail not because opportunity is missing, but because their vision is too small. Most people don't fail because the dream is too big. They fail because the dream is too small. The tragedy of life is not that we aim too high and miss, but that we aim too low and hit. The poor stay poor not because opportunity is absent, but because their thinking is too narrow, too immediate, too focused on comfort instead of creation. Wealth begins long before the bank account. It begins in the imagination, in the vision, in the courage to think beyond survival and start building legacy. If you can stretch your thinking, you can stretch your life. And if you can stretch your life, wealth will not just visit you, it will stay with you. So tonight, let's stop thinking small. Let's train our minds to think big, and let's uncover the millionaire money rules that can completely rewrite your financial destiny. When it comes to money, most people are trapped in the short term. They live paycheck to paycheck, never thinking beyond the next bill, the next purchase, or the next weekend. And the problem with that is simple. If you only live for the short term, you forfeit the long term. You trade tomorrow's freedom for today's comfort. And I can tell you, the comfort never lasts as long as you think, but the regret does. The truth is that the pain of discipline weighs only ounces, but the pain of regret weighs tons. So the question is, which weight would you rather carry? I learned this lesson when I was young and working odd jobs, barely making ends meet. Every dollar that came in already had a destination: food, rent, a little leisure. And I thought that was normal. But then someone challenged me to start thinking about the next 10 years, not just the next 10 days. That one shift in thinking was transformational. I sat down with a notebook and wrote out exactly what I wanted my financial life to look like 10 years down the road. I wrote numbers: how much income, how much savings, what assets I wanted to own, and what kind of lifestyle I wanted to live. And here's the amazing part. The moment I put that vision on paper, I started acting differently. My spending changed. My habits changed. Even my friends changed. Because I was no longer living only for today. I was building for tomorrow. It takes discipline to think long term. It means saying no to some of the pleasures that are right in front of you so you can say yes to something much greater down the road. That's why I recommend a simple practice. The 24-hour rule. Before you buy anything non-essential, wait a day. Give yourself time to ask, does this purchase serve my long-term vision, or is it just feeding a momentary desire? Most of the time, you'll find the desire fades, but the vision remains. And if the vision remains, you've just saved yourself not only money, but regret. Another principle that transformed my financial life was celebrating the right things. Most people celebrate when they buy something new, a car, a phone, a fancy dinner, but I learned to celebrate when I invested. I would pat myself on the back when I put money into an asset, when I funded my future instead of feeding my impulses. Over time, those celebrations became more rewarding than any purchase could ever be, because I knew I was moving closer to freedom. Discipline may feel heavy in the moment, but it's a small weight compared to the crushing burden of regret. The paycheck to paycheck life is easy to fall into, but it leads to chains. The long-term vision is harder to stick with, but it leads to freedom. So write down your 10-year financial vision, use the 24-hour rule, and start celebrating investments instead of consumption. Because when you choose the weight of discipline today, you escape the weight of regret tomorrow, and that choice will shape the rest of your financial destiny. When people live paycheck to paycheck, they aren't just struggling with money, they're struggling with vision. They see only as far as Friday, as far as the next bill, as far as the next moment of comfort. And the truth is, when you only look that short ahead, you miss the real opportunities that wealth has to offer. That's why discipline matters so much. Discipline forces you to look past the moment. It forces you to weigh the future against the now. The pain of discipline weighs ounces, but the pain of regret weighs tons. And when it comes to money, regret has ruined more lives than lack of opportunity ever could. I can tell you from my own life, there was a time when my financial future was nothing but survival. I was working hard, but I wasn't thinking ahead. If I got an extra bit of money, it was gone just as quickly as it arrived. Then someone put a simple idea in front of me. Write out a 10-year vision. Not just vague dreams, but numbers, specifics, a real plan. So I did. I wrote down what I wanted my income to look like 10 years from then, how much I wanted saved, what kinds of assets I wanted to own, and the kind of lifestyle that income would allow me to live. And that piece of paper changed me. Suddenly, every purchase I considered had to answer to the vision. Was it moving me closer, or was it pulling me further away? That's why I recommend the 24-hour rule. Before you make any non-essential purchase, wait a day. That one pause can save you from years of regret. In the moment, you think, I want it, I need it. But after 24 hours, you realize it was just a passing impulse. Now here's the key. When you stop feeding those impulses, you start feeding your future. Every dollar you don't spend on a temporary desire can be directed into something permanent, something that grows, something that produces. And here's another shift. Learn to celebrate the right things. Too many people throw a party for themselves when they buy something new. They pat themselves on the back for consuming. But real winners celebrate when they invest. The day you buy a share of stock, put money into real estate, or fund a savings account, that's when you should treat yourself, because those moments are milestones. They're signs that you've chosen discipline over regret, vision over impulse, the future over the fleeting present. The road to wealth is not paved with extraordinary events. It's built with ordinary disciplines, done consistently. Thinking long-term is one of those disciplines. It means creating a clear vision, guarding your spending with patience, and celebrating the seeds you plant for tomorrow. And if you do those things long enough, one day you'll wake up in a life that others call lucky, but you'll know it wasn't luck at all. It was simply the weight of discipline saving you from the ton of regret. Most people are taught to chase income, and there's nothing wrong with earning a living. A paycheck is necessary. But if all you ever build is income, you'll always be trapped by time. The moment you stop working, the income stops too. That's why the rich play a different game. They don't just focus on wages, they focus on ownership. They ask, what can I create? What can I acquire? What can I build that keeps paying me long after I've stopped working? That's the real key to freedom. Income is fine for survival, but assets are what buy you choice, what buy you options, what buy you time. I remember when I first realized this truth. I was working hard, doing all the things I thought were necessary, but I never seemed to get ahead. Then a mentor told me, don't just earn, own. That one phrase hit me like a thunderbolt. It shifted my whole way of thinking. From then on, every time I made money, I asked myself, how much of this can I keep? And how much of this can I convert into something that produces? That's when my financial life began to change. Now, here's the practical side. You don't need a fortune to start building assets. If all you've got is $50, you can begin. Open a simple investment account. Put that small sum into a fund, into a share, into something that grows. The amount isn't what matters, the habit island. Once the habit takes root, it expands naturally. A small seed eventually grows into a tree if you water it long enough. The mistake is waiting until you feel rich to start. That day may never come. Start now with what you have. And here's a system that works. Allocate 20 to 30% of your income toward assets. That could mean stocks, real estate, digital ventures, or any vehicle that produces cash flow. If 20% feels impossible, start with 5. But start. It's not about the percentage, it's about the discipline of treating yourself as your own first investment. Another discipline is to track. Every month, sit down and write out your assets and your liabilities. Most people avoid this because it feels uncomfortable. But discomfort is the beginning of wisdom. When you track it, you control it. And when you control it, you can grow it. Too many people live blind to their true financial state. They know what they earn, but they don't know what they own. Remember this. Wages are limited by your hours, but assets are limited only by your vision. A paycheck may put bread on the table, but assets will feed you for a lifetime. Don't fall into the trap of only working harder. Focus on becoming better. Build things that work when you don't, and you'll discover that wealth is not about effort alone, it's about ownership. The moment you make that shift, you stop being a worker of money, and you start becoming a master of it. Discipline is the great separator between those who wish for wealth and those who achieve it. Goals are wonderful, dreams are powerful, but without discipline, they remain only wishes. Discipline is the bridge that carries you from where you are to where you want to be. And the truth is, the bridge is not built overnight. It's built with daily, consistent action. A little bit, done faithfully, compounds into something extraordinary over time. Most people underestimate the power of small daily decisions. They think it takes one giant leap to change life, when in reality it takes a series of steady, deliberate steps. I've often said that success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. The opposite is also true. Failure is nothing more than a few small errors in judgment, repeated daily. You skip saving a little today. It doesn't seem like much. You avoid reviewing your finances this week. No big deal. But multiplied over years, those little errors create regret. On the other hand, the decision to save a small percentage, to write down your numbers, to review your progress every week, those choices, repeated, create freedom. Let me give you an example from my own journey. There was a time when I thought discipline was a burden. I resisted the idea of budgets. I didn't want to track every dollar. I wanted freedom without the fence of discipline. But what I discovered is that discipline doesn't take away freedom, it creates it. When I started automating my savings, just 10% at first, it was almost invisible. I didn't miss it. But month after month, year after year, that little discipline turned into something significant. What began as a trickle became a river, and eventually it built a reservoir. That's the power of small, consistent acts of discipline. One of the best ways to lock in discipline is automation. Decide today that 10, 15, or 20% of your income will be set aside before you even see it. Don't make it negotiable, make it automatic. If you leave it up to your feelings, you'll talk yourself out of it. But if it's automatic, the decision is made once, and the discipline takes care of itself. Another critical practice is keeping a written financial journal. Write down your numbers, your savings, your investments, your spending patterns. There's something powerful about putting it on paper. It makes it real. Most people keep their finances in their head, but what stays in your head remains fuzzy. Write it down, and it becomes clear. Clarity breeds responsibility, and responsibility breeds progress. And then, once a week, set aside the time to review. For me, Sunday evening became the moment. Just 30 minutes to look at where I was, what I had saved, where I had invested, and what adjustments I needed to make. That weekly habit gave me accountability. It made sure I was steering the ship instead of drifting. And when you review regularly, you can correct early. You don't wait for disaster to wake you up. You make small adjustments along the way that prevent big mistakes. Discipline may feel heavy in the beginning, but it is far lighter than regret. Regret weighs tons. Discipline weighs ounces. And the good news is, once you build the muscle of discipline, it no longer feels like a chore. It becomes part of who you are. It becomes your identity. And when discipline becomes who you are, wealth becomes inevitable. Wealth doesn't happen by accident. It's created by design, and the design is built on discipline. Wealth by itself is not the ultimate goal. Money can buy comfort, yes. It can buy convenience, yes. It can even buy time if you use it wisely. But money without purpose is empty. You can have a big house and still feel small inside. You can drive the finest car and still feel like something's missing. The truth is, the major value in life is not what you get, it's who you become in the process of building it and what you do with it once you have it. Wealth is not just about the accumulation of resources. It is about transformation. It's about becoming the kind of person who can handle wealth responsibly, who can use it as a tool for impact, not merely a ticket to luxury. I remember when I was young and broke, struggling to make ends meet, I thought money itself was the answer. If I could just make more, life would be solved. But when I began to earn, I discovered something surprising. Money didn't solve everything. It only magnified who I already was. If I was careless, it made me more careless. If I was disciplined, it made me more disciplined. And if I had no sense of purpose, it only made that emptiness louder. That's when I learned that money must be tied to meaning. Otherwise, it will leave you hollow, even when your pockets are full. So, the first step in building wealth with purpose is defining your why. Why do you want more? What's the mission? Comfort is fine, but comfort is not enough. If your goal ends with yourself, it will never truly satisfy you. Maybe your why is to take care of your family. Maybe it's to lift your community. Maybe it's to contribute to causes bigger than yourself. That why gives your wealth direction, and direction gives your life fulfillment. Once you define your purpose, start allocating a portion of your wealth toward it. 5 to 10% of your income, given consistently, not only transforms others, it transforms you. Generosity breaks the grip of greed. It reminds you that money is a tool, not a master. I've seen people who gave when they had little, and when they eventually had much, giving was already part of their identity. Wealth didn't corrupt them because they had already disciplined their hearts to serve, not just to spend. Another way to give wealth purpose is through teaching. Don't just accumulate wisdom about money, share it. When you teach someone else how to save, invest, or manage debt, you do two things. First, you strengthen your own discipline because teaching forces you to live what you say. And second, you create a ripple effect that multiplies beyond you. Imagine teaching your children sound financial principles. They pass it on to their children, and suddenly your wealth is not just numbers in a bank, it's a legacy of wisdom shaping generations. The measure of wealth is not the size of your account, it's the impact of your life. If you build riches but never build people, you've missed the point. If you grow your bank balance but shrink your soul, you've traded something priceless for something temporary. The goal is not to die rich. The goal is to live rich in contribution, in character, and in meaning. Money is best when it flows to you because of the value you've created, and when it flows through you to make a difference in the lives of others. Wealth without purpose is empty, but wealth tied to a mission is powerful. It's no longer just about comfort, it's about contribution. And when you use money to serve something greater than yourself, not only do you build wealth, you build a life worth remembering. Success does not arrive in one grand moment of inspiration, nor does it show up in a burst of energy that fades after a few days. It is built quietly, patiently, and steadily on the back of consistency. Most people are waiting for the big break, the magic opportunity, the one-time chance to turn everything around. But the truth is, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every single day. It's not intensity that makes fortunes. It's the daily rhythm of small actions repeated long enough to compound into extraordinary results. When I was first learning how to build a better life, I thought I needed something spectacular to happen. I thought wealth would come by stumbling upon the perfect deal or being in the right place at the right time. But soon, I learned that success is not about one lucky strike. It's about steady progress. It's about showing up every day to do the little things that others overlook because they seem too simple. Saving a few dollars, reading a few pages, writing down a few ideas. At first, they feel small, almost insignificant. But give them time, give them consistency, and they become powerful beyond measure. Think of it this way. If you save just $5 a day, at the end of a week, it wouldn't seem like much. But save it for a year, invest it, and let it compound, and suddenly you've built a habit that produces wealth. It wasn't the $5. It wasn't the act itself. It was the discipline of doing it daily, of staying committed even when the payoff seemed invisible. The marketplace rewards consistency, not flashes of intensity. Another practice that changed my thinking was writing down one money-making idea every morning. Not because every idea would be brilliant, but because it trained my mind to focus on opportunities instead of obstacles. Out of 100 ideas, maybe only 2 or 3 were worth acting on. But those 2 or 3 could change the course of your financial life. The discipline of doing it daily, even when uninspired, built a reservoir of creativity that I could draw on when opportunities arrived. And here's another truth. Consistency keeps you honest. By reviewing and adjusting your goals monthly, you create accountability. You can see where you slipped, where you progressed, and where you need to improve. It prevents you from drifting aimlessly, because consistency without reflection can turn into routine without progress. Success requires both steady action and constant adjustment. I often tell people, success doesn't demand you climb a mountain in one day. It only asks that you take a few steps every day in the right direction. The problem is, most people underestimate the power of small disciplines, and they overestimate the value of one big effort. They'll work like crazy for a week, then quit for a month, and wonder why nothing changes. But if you took that same energy and spread it into daily, consistent effort, you would look back in a year and not even recognize your life. Consistency is not glamorous, but it is undefeated. It builds character, it builds habits, and it builds results. If you can discipline yourself to do the small things faithfully, the big rewards will inevitably follow. The road to wealth is not paved with intensity, it is paved with consistency. And if you're willing to stay steady, day after day, the compounding effect of your discipline will carry you to success beyond your imagination. Money has an interesting nature. It doesn't come with instructions. It doesn't come with values. It doesn't come with a sense of direction. It simply goes where you send it. That's why I say money is a tool, not a master. Either you run the money, or the money will run you. Too many people get this backwards. They let money dictate their emotions, their decisions, their priorities. They earn a paycheck, And before they know it, it has vanished. Not because the money was small, but because the money was in charge. The real test is not how much you make, but whether you are the master or the servant in the relationship. I learned early that unless you tell money where to go, it will always find a way to slip away. That's why one of the greatest disciplines you can develop is assigning every dollar a job at the start of the month. If you don't, the dollars will assign themselves, and usually not in your favor. When you sit down with intention and say, this dollar goes to investments, this dollar goes to savings, this one covers expenses, and this one is for enjoyment, you become the manager, not the victim. You're building a plan where money serves your vision instead of undermining it. One practical way to keep this discipline alive is to separate your accounts. Have one account for spending, one for saving, one for investing. When everything is mixed together, it's too easy to spend what was meant to be saved or invested. But when you divide your resources with purpose, you protect your future. You put boundaries around your wealth, and those boundaries keep you free. Remember, structure doesn't restrict you, frees you from chaos. At the end of every month, ask yourself a simple but powerful question. Is money serving me or enslaving me? If your dollars went mostly toward debts, comforts, or mindless spending, then money ran you. But if your dollars went toward assets, savings, and growth, then you ran the money. This small reflection can tell you more about your financial destiny than any paycheck ever could. Because no matter how much money you make, if you don't learn to control it, it will always control you. Think of money like a hammer. A hammer can build a house, or it can destroy one. It all depends on the hand that wields it. In the same way, money can build wealth, freedom, and legacy, or it can build debt, stress, and regret. The tool itself is neutral. The master determines its purpose. When you choose to become the master of money, every dollar becomes a seed that works for your vision instead of against it. I've met people with modest incomes who live in peace and financial security because they mastered this principle. And I've met people with large incomes who are constantly anxious and overwhelmed because money controls every decision they make. The difference was never the size of the paycheck. It was who was holding the reins. So decide today. Money is not your master. It's your servant, your tool, your resource to create a better future. Run it well, and it will work for you for a lifetime. Fail to control it, and it will quietly control every part of your life. Wealth doesn't grow in the dark. It grows under the steady light of your attention. If you ignore it, if you neglect it, if you put it on the back burner while you chase distractions, it begins to fade. That's why I often say discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. It's not talent, it's not luck, it's the ability to keep your attention fixed on the things that matter most. Wealth is no different. It grows where your attention goes. Think about it. Most people spend hours scrolling, watching, or wandering, but only a few minutes, if any, looking at their financial picture. And then they wonder why money slips through their hands. What you consistently give your focus to expands. If you constantly review your financial goals, they begin to take root in your subconscious, guiding your daily choices. If you never look at them, they fade and life's urgencies take over. I learned long ago that it isn't enough to set big goals. You have to revisit them often enough that they stay alive in your mind. That's why reviewing your financial goals daily is one of the simplest but most powerful practices you can adopt. Each morning, when you remind yourself where you're headed, it sharpens your decisions for the day. You're less likely to waste money on impulse buys when your long-term vision is fresh in your mind. You're less likely to get discouraged by today's challenges when you're anchored in tomorrow's destination. That daily reminder is like watering a plant It keeps the seed of your financial vision alive. Another practice is tracking your net worth every 90 days. Why 90 days? Because progress isn't always visible day to day, but it is over a season. Looking quarterly helps you see the bigger picture. Sometimes your income may not have risen dramatically, but your debt went down, or your investments grew quietly. When you track this, you begin to see evidence that your attention is paying off. Nothing motivates like measurable progress. On the other hand, if you see your net worth shrinking, it serves as an early warning to make corrections before things get worse. And here's something simple but deeply effective. Write down one financial win each night. It doesn't have to be big. Maybe you skipped buying something you didn't need. Maybe you saved $5. Maybe you learned a new principle. Whatever it is, acknowledge it. This trains your mind to look for progress instead of problems. It builds confidence, and confidence fuels consistency. Wealth is not built overnight. It's built brick by brick, and each win is another brick in the foundation. I remember when I first started disciplining myself with these small practices. At first it seemed insignificant. What difference could writing down a small win make? But over time, I realized it was reshaping my attitude toward money. I stopped focusing on what I lacked and started celebrating what I was building. That shift in attention brought more energy, more discipline, and ultimately more results. Attention is the gatekeeper of your destiny. Neglect opens the door to waste and regret. Discipline keeps the gate strong and directs resources where they belong. If you want wealth to grow, you have to give it your eyes, your thoughts, and your consistent review. Otherwise, it will wither in the shadows of neglect. So never underestimate the power of consistent focus. Wealth isn't built by a single action, but by steady attention, daily discipline, and an unbroken chain of small victories. Keep your attention on your financial garden, and it will reward you with a harvest you can count on for years to come. Money is a curious thing. It doesn't show up just because you wish for it, or because you clocked in 8 hours today. It shows up as a byproduct of the value you deliver. You don't get paid for time, you get paid for the value you bring. If you want to build wealth like the top 1%, you must flip the way you think about money. Don't chase it. Instead, chase the value you create. Because when you create value, money has no choice but to follow. The mistake many make is thinking wealth is tied to effort alone. But effort without value is just motion, not progress. You can work tirelessly at the wrong things and never rise above survival. The shift begins when you start asking different questions. Not how can I make more money today, but how can I solve a problem that matters? If you take that question seriously and make it part of your daily reflection, you begin to see opportunities all around you. Every frustration you notice in your own life, every complaint you hear from others, every inefficiency in the systems around you, those are invitations to create value. Here's something practical I learned. Make it a daily discipline to ask, how can I make someone's life easier or better today? Not someday, not in theory, but right now. Maybe it's a service you can improve, a product you can refine, or an idea you can test. When you begin practicing this, it trains your mind to focus outward instead of inward, on contribution instead of consumption. And contribution, over time, becomes currency. Another discipline is to build things people truly need, not just what they want in passing. Wants come and go. Fads rise and fall, but needs are stable. People will always need shelter, food, health, knowledge, efficiency, entertainment, or tools to improve their lives. If you build in those categories, if you attach your energy to solving real and recurring problems, you give yourself a foundation for wealth that doesn't crumble when trends fade. Think of the wealthiest individuals in history. They created lasting solutions, not temporary distractions. That's the power of solving problems at scale. And here's an overlooked but vital practice. Document the solutions you've created and refine them. Too often we solve a problem once, then move on, forgetting the blueprint. But the ability to replicate and improve a solution is what turns a one-time act into a system, and systems are where fortunes are made. Maybe you figured out a better way to save money, to deliver a service, or to market a product. Write it down, refine it, test it again. Each refinement increases its value, and greater value attracts greater compensation. I'll tell you a personal truth. The turning point in my financial journey wasn't when I worked harder, it was when I worked smarter by making myself more valuable. I stopped measuring my worth by hours and started measuring it by the problems I could solve. And the market responded, opportunities grew, income multiplied, not because the clock ticked faster, but because my value increased. So remember, wealth doesn't begin with money, it begins with value. And value begins with you. The more you learn, the more you refine, the more you serve, the more valuable you become. And when you become valuable, money will chase you down. Don't ask for it to come first. Earn it by becoming a person of increasing worth. That's the surest path to freedom. When you start thinking about wealth, it's easy to get caught up in what it does for you, what it buys, what it provides, what it secures. But if wealth begins and ends with you, it has no real depth. True wealth extends beyond your lifetime. It's not about what you accumulate while you're here. It's about what continues to grow after you're gone. One person caring, one person acting with intention, can create a movement that lasts far longer than their years. And that's the true purpose of building wealth, to invest in what outlives you. When I began my own journey, I thought success was measured by what I could buy, how comfortable I could become, or how much freedom I could claim for myself. But I realized quickly that comfort fades, possessions wear out, and even personal freedom is only meaningful if it's used for something greater. The question shifted from, what can wealth do for me? To, what can wealth do through me? That's when everything changed. Wealth became more than a number. It became a tool for legacy. One way to put this into practice is to invest in education, not just for yourself, but for your family, your children, or even your community. When you teach someone financial principles, when you provide the resources for a young person to learn skills, when you plant the seed of knowledge, that seed grows far beyond anything money could buy today. Education is one of the few investments that compounds across generations. You give someone the tools to build, and they pass it forward. That ripple continues long after you've left the scene. Another way is to set aside resources specifically for those who come after you. This could be in the form of a fund, a trust, or even a simple plan to hand down assets wisely. The wealthy don't just think about their next purchase, they think about their grandchildren's future. They plant trees whose shade they'll never sit under. When you create systems that provide for the next generation, you're saying, my vision stretches farther than my years. That vision is what separates comfort from legacy. And then there's the matter of aligning your wealth with your values. If money is just stored up for the sake of accumulation, it stagnates. But if it flows into causes that matter, causes that reflect your beliefs, your heart, your vision, it multiplies in ways you can't measure. Maybe you support education, healthcare, clean water, or entrepreneurship in struggling communities. Every dollar you channel into those causes isn't just charity, it's seed capital for a better world. It outlives you because it changes lives that will go on to change others. I've seen people who thought legacy was only about leaving a name on a building or a plaque on a wall. But the real legacy is in the lives you impact, the opportunities you create, and the values you instill. Money can buy things, but legacy builds people. And people, when equipped and inspired, carry your influence forward in ways you'll never be able to measure. So the challenge is simple but profound. Don't just invest for yourself. Invest for what will outlive you. Put part of your wealth into education, into systems for the next generation, into causes that reflect your deepest values. In the end, wealth without legacy is empty. But wealth with legacy creates ripples that echo long after you're gone. And that is how one life can create a movement. Success has a pattern, and wealth has a blueprint. The mistake many people make is thinking they have to figure it all out on their own, as if the path to financial freedom is hidden in some secret vault waiting to be unlocked. But the truth is much simpler. Success leaves clues. Everywhere you look, there are people who've already walked the road, who've already faced the setbacks, solved the problems, and built the systems. If you want to be wealthy, study wealth. Don't just dream about it. Don't just hope for it. Study it the way a doctor studies medicine, the way a pilot studies flying, the way an architect studies blueprints. Because wealth, like any discipline, has fundamentals. And those fundamentals can be learned. Early in my journey, I realized that if I wanted to escape the trap of mediocrity, I had to start learning from people who had already escaped it. I couldn't afford to spend decades making every mistake myself. So I read biographies of self-made millionaires, not for entertainment, but for education. I wanted to know what they thought about when they woke up in the morning, how they approached opportunities, how they handled failure, how they managed their money. Every page revealed a clue, and those clues became the foundation of my own success. But books alone aren't enough. If you can, find mentors. Seek out people who are already where you want to be and study them closely. Not just what they say, but how they live, how they think, how they make decisions. Mentorship isn't about someone handing you money or giving you shortcuts. It's about someone allowing you to see the patterns in their life so you can model them in your own. If you can shorten your learning curve by 10 years simply by watching and applying the lessons of someone who's already done it, why wouldn't you? That's not just wisdom, it's leverage. And let me give you a piece of advice that will save you frustration. Copy proven models before trying to reinvent the wheel. Innovation has its place, but too many people go broke trying to be clever when they could have become wealthy simply by following systems that already work. If you want to build wealth, start with a model that's already created it for others. Real estate, businesses, investments, savings, systems. Once you've mastered the fundamentals, then you can innovate. But until then, humility pays far more than pride. Wealth isn't a mystery, it's a discipline. The wealthy aren't lucky, they're students. They studied the principles of money, they applied them with discipline, and they refused to ignore the clues that were right in front of them. You and I have access to the same wisdom, the same books, the same mentors, the same examples. The only question is, will we pay attention or will we insist on stumbling through in ignorance? Remember this, success leaves clues, and those clues are everywhere if you're willing to look, read, study, model, and apply. Wealth is not reserved for the gifted few, it's reserved for the serious. We've traveled through ideas tonight that I hope stirred something deep within you. Not just about money, but about the kind of person you must become to handle it wisely. Wealth is not just dollars in a bank account. It is the discipline to delay gratification, the courage to think long term, and the wisdom to make money your servant, not your master. Too many people live small, trapped by paychecks and bills, when the truth is that the same energy it takes to live small is the same energy it takes to think big. The difference is vision. The difference is discipline. The difference is deciding that your future is worth more than your excuses. So here is my challenge to you. Leave this room and take action tonight. Write down your 10-year vision. Start the savings habit, even if it's just a few dollars. Pick up the book. Call the mentor. Build a skill. Do something. Because wealth does not respond to wishes. It responds to work. Don't just be inspired, be transformed. Remember, discipline weighs ounces. Regret weighs tons. Choose discipline now so you can enjoy freedom later. The best time to start was yesterday. The next best time is right now.